Back to reality for the Pacers regular season. Just back on schedule tonight. In-season tournament's over. We'll wrap that up, talk about the Pistons, talk about the new challenges for the Pacers. And I want to talk a little bit about Bruce Brown and a stat I think is important for his season, all on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Monday, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today we're back in the normal setup. We're back with the good microphone. All is right in the world. I am somehow both jet-lagged and super tired, which is impossible. I shouldn't be recording at this time of day. But whatever, we've got a lot to talk about. Pacers, just right back in it. This is something Damian Lillard talked about that I think is interesting about the in-season tournament. It's over, and you go right back into the regular season. Back to reality for the Pacers. They play the Pistons tonight. I want to wrap up the in-season tournament with some big picture thoughts about that quick change of mental the Pacers will have to face. And then we'll talk a little bit about the Pistons themselves, who the Pacers beat back in November, are desperate for a win. Not as easy to beat those desperate teams, but Pacers should have the talent to do it. And I want to talk about Bruce Brown, specifically a stat that has been pesking me for a bit about him this season. And I'm just going to dig into the numbers a little bit to talk about his effectiveness. Something that stood out about the in-season tournament when talking to guys about it, right, listening to press conferences, was something I just alluded to. Damian Lillard talking about it for the Bucks. And something he said that still stands out to me is that people were asking a lot about comparing the games and the situation and the atmosphere to the postseason, to the playoffs, to a playoff environment. And I think for a single game setting, you can say that the crowd and the energy and the prep and the feeling you have before the game, a lot of that is similar to the playoffs. But what the thing that Dame said that made it feel not at all like the playoffs, and I think this is super true, is that the series part is a factor, but the thing he said that really separated is in the playoffs, you are playing to not go home. When you lose a playoff series, your season's done, right? You're done playing basketball. You have to take your months off. You have to live with defeat, knowing you didn't do enough. You can't just get right for the next week with other games against other opponents. It's just over. And the in-season tournament ends for the Pacers on Saturday. For other teams, it ended Thursday. For other teams, it ended Monday. For other teams, it ended after the group stage. Whatever, it ended. And then those teams, including the Pacers and the Lakers don't play till Tuesday, hop right back in to other games, regular season games with way less stakes, with way less buzz, right? It's just a big switch. That is the difference from the postseason that I think stands out the most when comparing these things. And so the Pacers now have that reality, right, of the biggest high they've had as a young team. For many of these guys, the rookies, the guys who have been with the Pacers since they were drafted, Halliburton, Hield, the literal most important games they've played in the NBA. Most stakes, biggest stage by a mile, national TV 3 games in a row, tons of media buzz in Las Vegas on neutral site, huge games, right? So all of a sudden, you fly back east and you're playing the Detroit Pistons for a regular season game, and it's not on national TV, right? The broadcasts are still going to be awesome. Both teams have fantastic broadcasts, but it's just way different. Like, there will be way less media at Monday's game. There will be way less fans at Monday's game. There'll be a lot less fanfare. There'll still be some attention on the Pacers, I presume, after their run, but that hard pivot is going to be hard. And the other point I would make is, and I hate to say this, I don't like making myself a part of anything, but I have this feeling, usually when the Pacers are on the West Coast and they have like back-to-backs and stuff, but like if I am tired, like covering the team because of travel or being up late or whatever, then usually the athletes who are like actually exercising like 6 to 8 hours a day, that's too high, exercising a lot, are also tired. And I am tired, and I presume the Pacers are going to be tired come Monday. Now, the Pistons stink. The Pacers should be able to out-talent them. But Dustin Dopirak and I were like joking about this all week in Vegas. Like, it would not surprise me at all if they rode this big high and had trouble getting up for the Pistons, and they lost on Monday. So this is ironically still part of the challenge the Pacers face from their big stage. Is coming off of it, climbing down from the stage and getting back to business as usual, adjusting to new teams, getting back into the regular season flow of things, and being able to take care of business against teams you should be better than, because, yeah, they beat the Pistons already by 23, I think. But that scoreline, like I said on the recap show of that Pistons game, was not accurate. It was close for much of the game. I believe the Pistons were winning in the fourth quarter that night, and then the Pacers just clobbered them for the final 6 minutes of the game. Yeah, you can look at the game charts. Pistons were winning early in the fourth, and the Pacers won that game by 23, right? It was close. The Pistons played them tough, and we've seen the Pacers have trouble with opponents that standings-wise or stylistically or whatever should be inferior. But they haven't won those games. They haven't earned the right to just look past anyone in any situation. And generally, those games, not always, have come after a big win, a nice win, right? The Raptors' 1-point loss came after that insane 300-point Hawks game. They had a big win over the Cavs and then had the dud against the Bulls. I can't remember what their they beat the Pistons by 23 in the in-season tournament to clinch home court or clinch the group. I can't remember. Before the Portland game, I can't remember if they had a big win before Charlotte. It might have been Philly. But either way, they're always riding a high coming into their worst losses this season, right? So now it's even bigger of a drop in terms of emotions. And yeah, they lost their last game, but this is just a big change in headspace and in focus and in what you need to do for the Pacers in a way that I think is significant, right? So I think that we've learned a lot about this team and what they're capable of at their best when they're locked in, when they know the task at hand. But we still need to learn a lot about this team's ability to keep momentum from those big wins, right? They have not been able to do that a lot this season. They've followed up a lot of their best performances with not so great performances. I can be a little more specific. The Charlotte loss was after the Cleveland in-season tournament win. The Chicago loss was after they won in Cleveland early in the season. After they beat Philly in Philly, their next game, they got their butt kicked by Orlando. Toronto, I already said, was after Atlanta. Portland, I said, was after they clinched home court in the group, right? A lot of just crummy losses. And so you could do that all season. They had that 3-game winning streak of San Antonio, Utah, Milwaukee. Other than that, it's been a lot of alternating wins and losses. They only have their longest losing streak is only 2 games. That's impressive for the Pacers, but they only have one stretch where they won more than 2 in a row. And so this team has kind of been a roller coaster, right? We've known that. That's been a problem for them. And this week sort of masked that because they're currently on a 3-game winning streak, because it's just hard to really contextualize that those games were regular season games against Boston and Milwaukee. They're currently on another streak like that, but it just felt different. The in-season tournament was different. The neutral sites were different. And I think Dustin nailed this, right? He said this, I think, in a question to Tyrese Haliburton. How do you go from playing LeBron on that stage on ESPN in Vegas, you shake hands with Flava Flav on the court and then walk back to the locker room, and then you play Detroit 44 minutes later on the road, normal regular season game. That's such a big pivot, right? And so the in-season tournament was great for the Pacers. I think they are now more tested. They know more about how to handle those situations that will help them come postseason time. I talked a lot about that on Sunday's podcast. I wrote about that, and I think that's great for them in the long term. But part of this test also that's unique to the in-season tournament that isn't a part of the playoffs, as Dame well explained, is they have to continue to ride the wave that they're on. And technically, they could be on a 4-game regular season winning streak if they win Monday, but carrying that momentum is going to be hard. There's going to be a lot of emotions at play. There's going to be a lot of physical strain at play, right? They're the only team that played on Saturday in the NBA. There were no games on Sunday, right? And Rick Carlisle joked that the Lakers don't play till Tuesday. Some of the teams that were maybe thought to be could be in the in-season tournament finals have that extra gap. Pacers don't have it. They play Monday, and Rick was joking, but it's going to be tough. I think it will actually be a tougher game than the standings gap and the Pistons' current 19, I believe. It is brutal in Detroit. Game losing streak suggests, and remember that, like I just said, Pistons were ahead in the fourth quarter the last time these two teams met. So once again, and this is probably the final time I can say this, because I think I've said this or talked about this every episode of Locked On Pacers for 4 or 5 in a row. The mental things the Pacers are learning will be significant in their next game. And then they play Dame next Wednesday. And I think after Halliburton's watch thing, that there will be some more to that. then they can finally return to a sense of normalcy. But back to reality tonight for the Pacers. I think that's going to be a big theme. I'll be very curious how they respond and if they're able to just get up and play normally and be ready to go, or if it's really hard for them to get going from the jump just because of everything they just had to go through. And now they're down Andrew Nembhard and Jalen Smith. So a little bit different rotations. We'll see, though. They are better than the Pistons, like talent-wise. There's no doubt about that. They did beat them already. Like, yeah, they were losing in the fourth, but they were also winning for a lot of that game. They did win by 23. What challenges do the Pistons present them? Who's the keys for the Pacers to win and get to a 4-game regular season winning streak? Remember, that loss to the Lakers, not a regular season game. So if I tweet tomorrow night after a win, 4-game winning streak, I am technically being right, but I am stretching a little bit, obviously. Let's talk about the Pistons and the keys tonight, and then we'll get to Bruce Brown and a key stat later on today's Locked On Pacers podcast. But we're not doing any of that until I tell you guys about the wonderful people over at PrizePicks, who are making daily fantasy sports made easy. It's simple. You pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections. Watch the winnings roll in. Basketball season's here. Combined with football, you can do that and play the Specials League over on PrizePicks as well. So you can combine sports. LeBron James plus Travis Kelce at a 10.5 combo of 3-pointers made plus receptions. That is similar to their whole games of PrizePicks too. Just for example, Luka Doncic on any given night, more or less than 32 points or whatever they set the line at that night. LeBron James, more or less than 7 assists. That is how PrizePicks works. It's that simple. You can make your picks in 60 seconds or less. It's very easy. They have a reboot policy, so your entries stay alive even if one of your players gets injured. The only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. Check it out, prizepicks.com. You've got to do it. prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA when you sign up. You'll get a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use that code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100 at PrizePicks Daily Fantasy Sports Made Easy. Back here on Locked On Pacers, thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, check out Locked On Lakers. We'll keep suggesting them until the Pacers play another opponent because they won the in-season tournament, riding a high. Very cool for them. Very cool to see the celebrations in Vegas. But back to reality here. Myself back in Indy, red-eyed it overnight. My first ever red-eye. For those of you who have done that before, I applaud you. That is a tough yet productive way to travel. Here we are, Pacers Pistons tonight in Detroit. The Pistons are crummy. They have not won since their 3rd game of the season. I believe they did not win a game in November. They have not won a game in December. They are desperate for a win when the Pacers beat them in that in-season tournament game back in November, I believe, November 24th. That was the 13th loss in a row for the Pistons. Full stop. If the Pacers lose, that's bad. There's going to be a lot of reasons mentally you could say they could, and the Pistons are going to be desperate for a win in every game they play until they win, which their schedule's hard. Might not be for a while, but the Pacers should win. Full stop. No excuses. They're the better team. No doubt. The Pistons do not have a good Tyrese Haliburton answer. We saw that very clearly last time. Like, their best answer was probably Ausar Thompson. Probably. I mean, they got decent minutes out of Jaden Ivey defensively, I thought, in that game. They have some okay bench defenders like Killian Hayes on the perimeter, but Haliburton had an off night. I mean, he would admit that to you. 5 for 13 from the field, 4 for 10 on twos that last time they played Detroit, and yet he still had 26 and 10 in a wonderful performance statistically, but not a game that he could be like so psyched about how he played, right? I think he would have thought and hoped that he played better in that game than he did. And so I think that for the Pacers to just straight up win and not have to worry about being in it in the fourth quarter or it being close, Haliburton just being better and continuing the momentum he gained last week in Vegas will be a big part of it, right? And I think he can do that. We've seen him bounce back from poor performances many a times, and he wasn't poor against the Lakers by any means, but below his averages in both points and assists, like the Lakers did limit him. So I think he's the guy to watch. If he can just be a little better than he was, right? He was below his average in 3-point percentage, way below his average in 2-point percentage, right? He had a turnover really early in that game. If he's just a hair better, that goes a long way, because what the Pacers had success with that game, if you remember, was one, they had to get funky with their rotation, and they can't do that this time. I think that's going to be another key story here, right? They got a ton of success out of those Isaiah Jackson, Jalen Smith joint front court lineups. They changed the game. Pacers had to go big. the Pistons are huge. And I believe Marvin Bagley's on the injury report and might not play. So they're going to have to change how they do it. I think you'll probably see like Jalen Duren and James Wiseman be the front court for the Pistons. But anyway, they had to go with two bigs, and it worked, but they might not be able to do that. And Andrew Nembhard was really good. He was plus 25 last time. His defense was important on Cade. He had 4 assists. He made 6 shots. So it's going to be different, right? The Pacers are going to be presented with different challenges. However, the Pistons have changed their lineups a million times. Jaden Ivey doesn't play as much. He had 25 points last time. Like, they're just a really weird team. So to me, the key man tonight for the Pacers, beyond Tyrese Haliburton, who again was not awesome. Like, his stats were good, but was not fantastic the last time these two teams played. The key man is Miles Turner. Miles Turner had 23 and 10, 5 offensive rebounds when they beat Detroit last time, but was in foul trouble. He had 5 fouls. He only played 27 minutes. He just had a stinky game. He was not good against the Lakers. He was in foul trouble all night. He could not contain Anthony Davis. His shot was not falling. It was a bad game. He fouled out. Frustrating night for Turner. To bounce back one would be significant for him. He has not been consistently in the red in terms of impact this season, but bouncing back would be significant, I think, for his confidence. And this is an opponent that he can do it against. But Jalen Duren, one of those strong, bruising centers, is a guy that he's going to have to battle with and that he's going to have to make a move on the other end. I think Turner putting the ball on the floor and getting to the rim like he does when he's absolutely at his best and most confident is going to be critical in this game. And so after a crummy performance, really rough for Turner. I mean, him or Brown or Hield having a better game against the Lakers might have been enough for them to be in it at the end. But if Turner can bounce back, I think that would go a long way, because the Pistons front court, they have a lot of interesting young guys who I think can be dangerous one day. I like Duren already, but none of them were particularly good when these teams met last time, except for Duren, who had 13 and 13. He'll probably start now, right? That was his first game back from injury at the time. I think Turner exceeding Duren's impact is going to be crucial, because we've seen that the Pacers at their best against Detroit know what it takes to slow Cade Cunningham. Bruce Brown did a great job at that. Their defensive scheme in the second half really slowed him down. Yes, he had an awesome 31 points. It took him 26 shots to get there. He had 4 turnovers and 5 assists. Like, they did a good job with him, right? Jaden Ivey played pretty well, but I think they know the blueprint there. It doesn't seem like the Pistons trust him a ton. Like, the thing that's going to matter the most for the Pacers, they know what it takes to slow the rest of the Pistons is going to be that front court battle. If Turner does well against Duren in this game, if he makes him move, right, don't let him be static and productively static, like where he's able to be a bruiser, where he's able to cause issues being around the rim. I think that's going to be significant, because Isaiah Stewart didn't have the impact I thought he would against the Pacers last time, and no one else is super threatening on that team on the offensive end in general besides Cade and Duren. I mean, Ivy can be, but they don't play him a ton. So I think Miles Turner is really significant in this game. And in general, the vets who did not have great nights bouncing back would be huge, right? Bruce Brown's defense was huge last time these two teams played, but his offense was not particularly fantastic. But Buddy Hield was very good. He was 6 for 11 on his way to 18 points. Turner, like I said, had 23 and 10. And all three of those guys could use a bounce back performance. So against a team like this, being vets, being the best players on the floor, I think it's going to go a long way. And if the Pacers bench also can continue to be effective, they have, let's just say, a little bit more depth and talent on the bench than Detroit. That should be a way they can get an advantage. There's a lot of ways you could say that could be the thing that gives the Pacers a win, or that. But if Haliburton's better and Turner can outpace Duren in the front court, I think the Pacers can win. But there's so many weird factors at play, like I said in the start of this, that make it not that simple. We'll see. I think the Pacers should win. They will obviously be killed if they don't, as like roasted. Killed is such a strong verb there. As they should, though. I mean, they're way better than the Pistons on paper. They've already beaten them this season. So see how it goes. We'll be breaking it all down tomorrow here on the Locked On Pacers podcast. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to a more regular game where I don't have to talk about the environment and Las Vegas and the glitz and glamour and everything, and getting back to more normal. And will be fun, at least for me, talking about these things. Speaking of normal, I want to dial in on a player. I think the only guy I've done this with this season was Obi Toppin last week before his X Factor against the Bucks segment, talking about his threes and his skill and his stats and splits and things like that. Bruce Brown, you're going under the microscope today, unintentionally doing the two new Pacers for the first ones of these, and we'll slowly get through everybody on the team. We have enough data and time in the season now to really kind of dive into the numbers on a lot of guys. And Bruce Brown gets today's for a unique stat about where specifically, he is taking his shots. We'll get to that to close out today's show, but not until I talk to you guys about the wonderful people over at FanDuel. As the weather gets colder, oh man, landing in Indy and being able to see my breath after being in Vegas was brutal. The NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel right now. New customers get a $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. Hopefully you didn't put it on the Colts against the Bengals, but if you get a winning $5 moneyline bet on FanDuel, you get $150 in bonus bets. How about that? Your team wins 150 smackaroos. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action than right now. NHL, rolling, NBA, pushing through into December, NFL. Action's been hot for a while. The app is super easy to use. FanDuel has a wide range of betting options, including player props, over, under, spreads, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get that offer and kick off the NFL season over on FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. Back here on Locked On Pacers, thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Check out Locked On Pistons for your second listen. Hear about this 19-game losing streak. Kuka Hill, covering teams like the Pistons is tough. James Edwards kills it for The Athletic, and Koo kills it on Locked On Pistons. It's tough to do, but he does a good job figuring it out. Bruce Brown, a former Piston, unintentional, but hey, we'll make it work today. Look, Bruce Brown, I want to talk about both ends of the floor with him, but I have noticed something about Bruce Brown that was kind of getting under my skin of like, how do I want to approach this? Why do I think this is happening? Bruce Brown, it seems like he settles for shots more than I've ever seen him do with prior teams. And I don't know why that's the case. He went 3 for 5 in Philly in that first game and 5 for 11 in the second game. Since that 5 for 11 game, this includes his 30-point game, he's shooting really well from the field, or good enough at least, 48.5%. His stats look good. On the season, from the field, 47.2%. That seems really good. But it's kind of shocking that it feels like it should be lower in my head. And maybe that's just because his last 2 games, he's 6 for 19. But right before that, of course, he had that amazing 30-point game in Miami. But I was just surprised at how high that number was. And I think I figured it out. It's because, well, first of all, he has multiple games like the one I just described. 3 for 9 in Milwaukee, 3 for 10 against Boston. This is not to say he played bad in these games. This is just looking at literally his shooting percentages in these outings, right? 3 for 10 when they played Detroit earlier in the season, 3 for 9 when they beat Milwaukee, 4 for 11 when they beat Utah, right? He has a lot of games like that. 1 for 6 in Boston. Everybody sucked that night, whatever. He has a lot of games like that. And I'm starting to figure out why I feel like his shooting percentage is such a roller coaster. And that's because his shot diet is weird. It's just weird. Bruce Brown is making, if you look at his shooting percentages by area, pretty similar to his career numbers in a lot of places, right? 1% off on threes. At the rim, he's a little bit above, but not that much above. But the mid-range is where Bruce Brown is throwing me off. He is really leaning into it, and I'm not sure why. And I don't understand it. And I want to ask him about it the next time I see him. They're on the road for like a week. I might go to Milwaukee. We'll see. Unlikely. But as you dive into this, Bruce Brown for his career is taken 7.4% of his shots from 10 to 16 feet. The only time in his entire career that number was over 10% before the season was his second season with the Nets, the year they got Harden, and they needed him to start spreading out a little more. His three-point rate upticked from the last year in Brooklyn. All of his percentages away from the rim went up. He took longer shots away because they needed him to. And it was still only 10% from that range. This year, 10 to 16 feet is 15.5% of his shot attempts. Something about the way the Pacers are having him play is enticing him into that like pushing runner shot thing that like goes in enough that when he takes it, I get why he takes it, but I don't think he should take it as much as he's taking it. That's way higher than his career percentage. And he's making 43.3% of them. That's okay, but you'd like a higher percentage, especially for the best offense in basketball history. And for his career, his percentage from that range is much lower. Now, obviously, he gets better as he gets older, so it's not great to look at his career percentage, but it's safe to assume that a little bit of regression is possible. I mean, he only shot 39% from that distance last season. So I don't know why Bruce Brown is taking more of those, but I think he should take less. Oh, by the way, he is also taking the most long twos he's ever taken. And that percentage of his shots from that distance has gone up every year of his career since his first year in Brooklyn, which is super strange because his 3-point percentage has sort of stabilized at a credible number. His 3-point rate has spiked the last 2 seasons, right? Almost 40% of his shots are threes. That's great. That's great. Why he's settling for these long twos, I don't know. It's only 4.7% of his shots. It's not a big deal. And here's the thing. He's been crushing it. 55% of them have gone in. We're talking about a very small number of shots, but just like, why is he taking them? Why is that a shot that he is taking in general? And what shots is going away for that? Because his 3-point attempt rate's also up. Well, from 3 to 10 feet, where he's been okay accuracy-wise his whole career, but he's actually shooting pretty well with the Pacers from that distance. He's only taking 18.7% of his shots from that far. That's a career low. In fact, he was at 26% last year with the Nuggets, and he was never below 39% before that, right? So he used to be better at getting into the paint a little bit. I just read those numbers wrong. Excuse me. This is still a career low for him from 3 to 10 feet, but by like 3 or 4%. But he's not getting in close like that. And then at the rim, this is where I just read the numbers wrong. 18% of his shots from 0 to 3 feet, which, like I said, 26% last year with Denver, and then 39% or higher. This is from 0 to 3 feet every year before that. So the big change is, look, a lot of it's that he's taking threes, and so that takes away some of the shots at the rim. But he's trading in some mid-rangers for shots at the rim, and he does get a lot of his shots inside the arc as self-created, right? Of his 2-pointers this year, 55% are assisted, which means almost half of his made twos he creates himself, which is fine. He handles it well. He's not like a high turnover guy. That's fine. In fact, his turnover rate this season still pretty low, 9.6%. You're very happy with that as the Pacers. So the thing that stands out as digging into all this is, why isn't Bruce Brown getting to the rim? I need to dive into the film more to really figure it out, because the Pacers have good spacing. They move the ball around pretty well. Maybe it's that he's passing out of drives a little more on a team that likes to pass. Maybe he's just comfortable with that shot. He takes that little push shot because it's going in. Like, the percentages from all these mid-range shot spots, like I said, are not bad, but it's very perplexing to me because he is a good rim finisher. Almost 70% for his career at the rim, over 72% this season, over 80% last year with Denver. Obviously, everything's easy on that Denver team, but still, the last 4 seasons of his career, he's been hovering at or over 70%. He's at 73% the last 4 seasons of his career from 0 to 3 feet. That's a productive shot for him. And sure, he's having someone create them for you is nice, but Halburn's a good passer. He draws defensive attention. So I don't know why, and I want to ask him about it. But Bruce Brown, I think some of his offensive effectiveness being so roller coastery is he needs to go to the Karis LeVert school of get all the way to the rim. Stop settling for the floater so much. And that helped. That was when Karis LeVert was at his best. It's still the case to me with the Cavs. He's getting all the way to the rim. One extra dribble. I want to see that from Bruce Brown. I think that could help his effectiveness. On defense, the thing for me with him is I've just figured out that there is a limit to what his size can do, right? He's great on guys like Dame. He's not so good when he has to go against guys who are like way taller than him, which he has to sometimes because of the Pacers' limitations. And I think that's where people say, oh, well, it doesn't seem like he's the defender that the Pacers pitched him to be. Well, he's asked to take on some hellacious tasks for his size and height. And when he gets guys like Dame as his assignment, or Cade Cunningham, who they play tonight, he does pretty well to me, right? I still think he does well in those. A lot of the numbers bear out, very interestingly, that he plays with the starters so much, but there, he is an impactful player on both ends. You can see when you look at the splits with him on and off what that kind of looks like. But their offense kind of holds up even with Halliburton out and him on there. They have 119.3 offensive rating with Brown on the floor and Halliburton off. That's very good, right? But their defense is not super awesome in those minutes. So he is a little overtasked because he has to be on this team. And I think that's kind of the story of why it doesn't feel like he's been as good as the billing was before the season. But I think he's been a great defender for the Pacers all season. I think the thing that can uptick his impact is getting to the rim all the time and not settle for that mid-range shot. We'll see what the case is. Once I ask him about it, if he provides an interesting answer on why he turns to that shot, then I can change my tune here. But I thought it was interesting to really dive into the numbers. We're 20 games in. Stuff is starting to settle in as kind of normal, air quotes, on stats. So Bruce Brown, I think, has been a good player for the Pacers, but some room to get better. And I think he would admit that as well. Thank y'all for listening today. I like doing these deep dives on players, and I think that they will be a frequent third segment on these game preview shows going forward. Also, yes, I know this is like 7 shows in a row with no guest. I promise there'll be one probably Wednesday, Friday this week. We'll see. Speaking of this week, talking all about the games. Pistons recap tomorrow, talking Bucks on Wednesday, Bucks recap after that, and then the 15th, a significant day. A lot of players can be traded come December 15th. I'll talk some Pacers trade thoughts, not too many, no specific names. It's way too early for that. As we head into the first day of trade season and a back-to-back over the weekend for the Pacers. So fun stuff coming here on Locked On Pacers after their in-season tournament run. Thanks to everybody for rocking with me during that time. It was really fun. It was crazy to do 8 days in a row of shows here on Locked On Pacers, and we're still going. We're going to get to 13 at least, depending on how their weekend ends up. So thank y'all so much for that. It's been a blast. I'm on Twitter at Tony R. East. This show is at Locked On Pacers. Back tomorrow talking whatever happens in Pacers Pistons here on this show. Till then, everybody, have a great day.